Notre Dame favored to make the playoff at minus 170. No conference championship required, right? That's Tyler Wojciak joining me here, locked on Notre Dame. So, Tyler, do you agree that it should be a situation where you have to bet more than a one-to-one amount in order to make a unit, just for Notre Dame to make the playoff?
Well, I would say that's certainly expectation around Notre Dame right now is they fully expect to make the playoff this season. I think anything less would be a disappointment. Honestly, anything less than a win in the first round, I think the college football playoff would be a disappointment for a bunch of different reasons. This is Marcus Freeman's third year as head coach of Notre Dame. Notre Dame coaches in the past, their third year has typically been a big indicator of success. They have three coaches who won national championship in the third season: Lou Holtz, Eric Parsegian, Dan Devine. Brian Kelly made it to a national championship his third season. That was probably the closest he got, despite the fact that that game was not very close. So it's just been a big indicator of success. And I think with Notre Dame, their team is loaded. They bring back a bunch of players from last year, a ton of production. Certainly there are questions, just like there are with every single team in the country at this point in the season, but their schedule is also very favorable. Oddly enough, despite the fact that Notre Dame is favored to win 10.5 games, they are projected to lose the season opener against Texas A&M. So I think the way that Vegas sees it, they're going to lose on the road against Texas A&M in the season opener, run the table, go 11-1, and then make the college football playoff. I don't think that they're going to lose in the season opener. I do think it's going to be close, but I think that 10.5 is right about where they should be. And if they go 11-1, they're going to make the college football playoff.
I think if Notre Dame beats Texas A&M, they are a near lock to make the playoff when you look at their schedule, because most of their toughest games, Tyler, are coming at home. I mean, you just go down, you see, oh, okay, Louisville, yeah, you got them at home. Okay, well, the Florida State, oh yeah, well that's going to be at home. And every other game, you kind of look at it and go, yeah, you got USC on the road the final week of the season, but those are the four games I feel like that are going to define Notre Dame's season. You've got two at home. You've got two of them on the road. And I just feel like if they can eclipse either Texas A&M or USC, feels like they're a lock to host a first-round playoff game, because Notre Dame can't be one of the teams with a top four bye in this 12-team playoff, because they don't have a conference championship to play for because they are Notre Dame. But that's probably okay if you're Notre Dame's athletic director and administration, because you're thinking, well, how much revenue do we bring in with a home football game, let alone a home playoff game? That has to be wildly appealing to the Irish, and the schedule works out really, really well for that to happen.
Yeah, I remember when they announced the format for the expanded playoff, and a bunch of Notre Dame fans were all upset that they didn't get a first-round bye. They basically disqualified themselves from that. I'm like, okay, let's take a step back for a second. First of all, Notre Dame's old athletic director, he just retired this past spring, Jack Swarbrick, was in the room when those decisions were made. So he was advocating for Notre Dame to – I shouldn't say advocating. He was perfectly okay relinquishing that first-round bye, because think of it this way. If Notre Dame goes undefeated this year, or actually if they go 11-1, they won't get that fifth seed. But let's say they go undefeated, they get that fifth spot. They would most likely play the group of five, like the best group of five, the highest ranked group of five team who gets that automatic bid at the 12th spot. That's their first round. So, yes, they wouldn't have a bye, but what do you need to do in order to get a bye? You have to win a conference championship. So that's effectively the first round game, right? Would you rather play one of the best teams in your conference in a conference championship to earn that bye, or would you rather host a home playoff game against a group of five team in the 5-12 game in the scenario that Notre Dame would be in the top four, that would, where the top four teams would get a bye? Notre Dame isn't getting one in the sense that the other teams are, but they are still kind of getting a much better situation if they end up going undefeated. So,
hold on. A little bit, I think it can be a better situation, but that's assuming Notre Dame would be the 5 seed and play the group of 5 highest ranked conference champion that is in, whether that's Boise State, Memphis, Tulane, Fresno, Liberty, James Madison, plenty of contenders for that particular spot. But Notre Dame, I think, would have to be 11-1 to ensure that, because it would seem like 10-2 gives you a chance, but a 10-2 team being the 5th seed in the 12-team playoff,
that wouldn't happen.
I doubt that that's happening.
Honestly, if Notre Dame goes 11-1, they're probably not the 5th seed, because the schedule is just not good enough, at least as it stands right now. It's funny. Like we always talk about what a schedule is or what it's not going to be in July. And then more often than not, it ends up not being what we thought it'd be. But if you look at Notre Dame's schedule right now,
don't tell people that. They might turn us off.
I think if you look at the toughest games in the schedule right now, Florida State stands out. But as you mentioned, they play them at home in November. I don't imagine there's a ton of players on Florida State who want to go all the way up to South Bend and play a frigid, cold game in early November. As a matter of fact, Notre Dame played Florida State in the snow a few years ago at home in November, and these were like the real down years for Florida State. It was really cold, and Notre Dame's players all came out like with their shirts off, and Florida State players came out with like 18 different layers on. They looked like Ralphie from A Christmas Story. They did not want to be there that day. I would imagine that in the Mike Norvell era, where this team is actually competitive, they'd have a different mindset about that game. But that is the toughest one. If they were to win every game except that one, they would make the playoff. They would not be the 5th seed. They'd probably be somewhere around 8 or 9. If they go 10-2, honestly, with the schedules, like say they lose their 2 toughest games, lose at Texas A&M, at Florida State, I don't think it's
hosting Florida State.
Yeah, hosting Florida State at Texas A&M. I don't think it's a lock that they make the playoff. I think that they would, but it'd be close because if you lose those 2 games, what is their biggest win? You mentioned Louisville. I don't know if that's like a huge win. USC is a bit of a wild card. We have no idea what to expect from them this season, or at least I don't. Maybe you have a better idea. I shouldn't put words in your mouth. I mean, I don't really see another big win other than the 2 I mentioned.
Yeah, I think it can definitely depend on what other teams do. Now, I'm higher on USC than most. They have a brutally tough schedule. I mean, they wanted to get out of their opening game in 2024 in Vegas against LSU because the rest of their schedule is sufficiently tough. They've got Notre Dame on it. They have to play a Big Ten schedule now. I think for Notre Dame, they have to hope that either USC or Texas A&M put up at least 9 wins. And they could be hoping that in the context of getting the 5th seed to play the Group of 5 champion, or they could be hoping that to boost their strength of schedule to get into the playoff at all. Because I agree, if you look at this schedule and you say it's 10-2, like let's say the losses are FSU and USC, and you have wins over Louisville and Texas A&M. What if Texas A&M goes 8-4, and what if Louisville goes 9-3? Is that enough? Are those going to be significantly high-profile wins where the committee goes, yeah, 10-win Notre Dame is going to be in the playoff? Because to me, with the schedule, it feels more, because it is very ACC heavy, it feels like an ACC or Big 12 10-2 rather than a Big 10 or an SEC 10-2. Whereas in those conferences, I think if you win 10 regular season games, you are a lock for the playoff.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's why I think Notre Dame has to go 11-1 or undefeated to feel really good about their place in the college football playoff. I mean, like I said, they could still make it. It would depend. Like if they drop the game to Louisville, but then they beat Florida State at the end of the year. Like timing does play a part in all of this. They play Louisville and Texas A&M in the first month of the season. They play Florida State and USC in November. So if they have a slow start, but then they beat, let's say, a top 10 ranked Florida State team and then close the season with a big win on the road against USC, they'd have some momentum. They'd probably make the college football playoff. But I think, that all plays a part into it. And the fact that they don't have a conference championship does complicate things. I do think that it's a little bit overblown in terms of like, oh, they're not a serious team because they're not in a conference championship. As I just broke it down, it's like they do have to play that one extra game. It just, if all things go to plan, they should be the 5 seed. I feel pretty good about this team going 11-1. I'm not ready to say that they're going to go undefeated because just going undefeated is really hard, man. It's really, really hard. You're going to have a game. Like there's going to be one team on the schedule other than the teams that we've already mentioned. Northern Illinois, they should smoke, but Purdue could be tough. Miami of Ohio is a decent MAC team. Stanford, Georgia Tech, Navy.
Sorry,
Virginia.
just coughing.
Yeah. Again, like we laugh now, but every year there's always one
every
game
year.
where this goes for pretty much every team, unless you're like Georgia at the peak of their powers, where like you did not prepare like you should have in the week leading up to the game.
Or something is just off with your team. You have a weird road trip. A meal goes awry.
Yeah.
Guys
happens.
don't sleep. It does have. Even Georgia, when they were winning back-to-back national championships, they were in a dogfight, I think, against Missouri. Kentucky pushed them. Like, nothing is ever easy. So I like your point about going undefeated there. But Notre Dame's win total is 10.5. So Vegas clearly feels really good about their ability to navigate the schedule. The playoff path is there. They just have to they just have to do what? What's your one biggest key to Notre Dame making the playoff?
I don't really have any concerns about the defense. They were top 5 defense in the country last year. They bring back a lot of their key players, including Xavier Watts, who won the Bronco Nagurski Award. So I feel good about that. I would say the biggest question I have about the team is the offensive line, which is definitely not something that we're used to as Notre Dame fans, because when you think of Notre Dame football, you think of like a great offensive line, all the different guys that they produce at the NFL, Zach Martin, Ronnie Stanley, Quentin Nelson, Mike McGlinchey, the list goes on and on. That has been the staple of the program for the past few decades, really. And now all of a sudden this year with Joe Alt being drafted in the top 5, Blake Fisher leaving after his junior year, he got drafted pretty high as well. So they have to replace 2 starting tackles, and that is a big question mark. Even though they recruit really well on the offensive line, I think their timeline got a little jacked up because typically offensive linemen, especially at Notre Dame, don't leave after their 3rd year. And then this past offseason, they had 2 guys leave after the 3rd year. So they have talented guys playing the offensive line, but they are not very experienced. But if the line is just like above average, they'll be fine. They should make the playoff with these. But if their line really struggles, and it did back in 2021, the last time that they had to replace 2 tackles, they were bad at the start of the season, and it was a big reason why they lost to Cincinnati in 2021. It was their only loss of the season. That year, Cincinnati went on to make the college football playoff because they just had no time back there. If that line would play better in that game, I think the course of college football could be a little bit different. I don't think Cincinnati makes the playoff because I think Notre Dame wins that game. And then Notre Dame goes undefeated that year. And who knows if Brian Kelly ends up at LSU. So I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent there. But, like, it's kind of crazy how it all kind of boiled down to the offensive line. I think it's going to happen again this season.
It's the Always Sunny meme. Guy on the board. If this move hadn't gone just like that, then would have been okay. Great stuff. Tyler Wojciak, Locked on Notre Dame. Appreciate the time.
Appreciate it, man.